Hi everyone and welcome to another TAILEATERS Discussion. My name is Lee Adams. I'm the co-host of Cosmic Echo, TAILEATERS Podcast. In this discussion, we talk about consciousness and all things related. We go kind of on topic and off topic throughout the discussion and just have a good time with a couple of random good people that are interested in the subject. So without further ado, let's get to the discussion. Well, the topic is pretty open, so you guys are welcome to discuss anything. But Mike and Maurice, um, they have a podcast as well called Their Names. So they're cool guys. They know a lot about consciousness, and they have a lot of interesting people on their show. So, um, yeah. So I mean, it's pretty open discussion. What,
Sweet.
what have you guys been into like lately with some of your hosts and stuff?
So we recently, and this is kind of what's sent me down the rabbit hole recently, is simulation theory.
Mm.
Like Tom Campbell, even some of the other theoretical physicists, like some of the smartest people in what we would consider by academic standards, some of the smartest people do believe that we're living in a simulation. Um, Almost like our consciousness is the observer and we're being fed data, like ones and zeros kind of, and we're putting the whole picture together. But it talks about like entropy, which is the measurement of randomness, and they get into the whole double slit experiment thing, and it's just, I think the biggest problem with consciousness though is being able to just actually describe what it is. Like everybody has different definitions. I talk to people where they think it's your soul or your spirit. Other people think it's, you know, like a byproduct of nature. Like Sean Carroll, who's a physicist and a whatchamacallit, a teacher, I think at Caltech or one of those schools. He talks about how it's like a byproduct of biology, kind of like how we know air is air and we breathe it and it's a thing, but we don't actually see it. So like that's his theory on what consciousness is. Obviously can't prove that, but so I think the biggest problem is pinning down what consciousness actually means, and then from there, what are the components.
Yeah, that's a good point, man. Yeah, I'm taking some classes from or JFK University, and the whole degree is called Consciousness and Transformative Studies. And very rarely do we even talk about consciousness in the class, just because it's so vast of a subject,
Yeah.
and
Where do you even start with that?
and nobody even knows what the hell's going on with it. So it's like, but I asked the dean of my college if I was like, what do you think of AI becoming conscious? A lot of people today are talking about that. And I mean, the guy that, I forget his name. Hey, I'm horrible with names, but the guy that he ended up killing himself, but he was the one that made the machine in World War II that was could
Alan Turing.
yeah, Alan Turing, that's it. And he described he thought computers were conscious already. It was just a different form of consciousness. But anyways, the teacher was like, she said that she didn't think that computers would be conscious, and I
I
thought
agree
that
with
was
both
interesting.
of those things. Yeah, I agree with both of those things you just said. Um, Not to jump in again,
Yeah.
but I think the thing you were saying about Alan Turing, and I think he was touched too. He was on the spectrum. I think he was what you call it, the form of autism where you're very
Oh
uh,
yeah.
Savant.
intelligent. No, it's called something. I can't think of the name right now, but basically what you're saying about computers, I believe that that's true. Like I don't think computers, I think it's a different consciousness. I don't think it'll ever, they might start to think on their own and do their own thing, but I think we're naive to think that we're going to create something that's going to be just like us. I think we're unique in the sense that we are biological matter, that's manifested itself into this um, awareness. I think that's what consciousness is awareness. It's awareness of yourself, who you are, your correlation to other things in the universe, whether it be the cosmos or animals or plants, whatever. It's the awareness of everything around you.
What do you think, Yuri?
Oh, well, you guys are talking. I went to went to Mr. Google to
Oh,
to
nice,
type it in.
nice.
so so what it says is consciousness, the state of being aware of and responsive to one's surrounding. Two, a person awareness or perception of something. So of course after that I type in awareness, and then it says
Go
knowledge or
around in a circle,
perception
man.
of a situation or fact, concerned about and well informed interest in a particular situation and development. But you see, the thing is, if it's like that, you know, plants react to light.
Yeah,
Metal reacts to heat,
yeah,
to cold. You can say metal is reacting to the changing environment in a certain way, so it's conscious then. So we can go far, far, far away. So it's
yeah.
not. So I don't think humans are beholders of consciousness and say, oh, I write books so I'm conscious. Nah, that was not the basis, and probably it won't be the limit.
Yeah, that's a good point, man. Yeah,
you can you can go basic, and you can develop to unimaginable limits that we are probably not capable even to grasp them.
yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, I hear a
Well,
lot
yeah, if
of.
you're going to,
Oh, go ahead, man.
I was gonna say if you're going along those lines, it's kind of the same like theories that Campbell guy is talking about. Where, I mean, if we're building computers and then feeding them information, isn't that along the same lines as what you were talking about? Like we're being fed information from a higher
Yeah.
source, so it's kind of a step down from the whatever is happening with us.
It's like the Giants marble thing, except different. Like each phase. I look at it as like we're going to create these robots, and the robots might create some other new technology or intelligence or whatever that we just don't even know about because that's going to create that. But we created the robots. Maybe something created us in that sense too. Like maybe there's something different than biological matter that we just can't understand. With our perception and what we know, and what the fuck do we even know anyways.
Yeah,
We're talking about consciousness, and we're trying to pin down exactly what it is, and nobody knows what it is. So I mean,
Well,
I
if,
think
if this guy's if he's going to college and he's going to professors, you go, "What's consciousness?" They don't fucking know.
right.
yeah. No one really knows, man. Like,
That's how do you take a class on it? Like, what is? Are you just studying
well, the
people that
classes
study
are
consciousness,
they're
or
broad classes, so they have different classes that you can take, like shamanism and dreaming, things like that. So I've taken some classes on like lucid dreaming. That's kind of one of them, or Jungian
yeah?
archetypes. Mythology is one I'm taking right now. And every aspect of those kind of like play into like a ultimate theme of consciousness and kind of understanding what it is and where your place is in the world. But one
Sounds
thing
pretty interesting.
yeah, they're interesting classes, but they're kind of very subjective
Yeah.
classes, not hard science stuff. But one thing that I have noticed through interviewing some shamans in the past and talking with them is they tend to agree with Youri, where consciousness is it doesn't it's not locked to humanity or even animals or plants. Like a lot of people don't realize that plants have consciousness.
Yeah.
We can't really talk to them, but you can see them move and react to things, and they definitely have ability to do that. But like even so strange as like having a rock have consciousness, like um, there's a lot of shamans out there that think that rocks even have some type of consciousness. So it's interesting to hear what Yuri had to say about the metal responding, and that plays into the definition.
Do you guys ever hear of the Japanese scientist Masaru Emoto? He did an experiment where he would play
The
happy
water
class.
guy.
Yeah, he would play happy classical music and good positive music when he would freeze the water into crystals, and the
Oh, there you
crystals
go.
Yeah, I have seen
and the
that.
crystals when it was good would come out at these beautiful structures, these amazing geometric shapes and everything. And then when he would play like heavy metal or something negative or whatever, it would go the opposite way. It would create like a distorted, ugly, so if we're talking about even water might have some sort of you know I don't even know what you would call it,
Yeah.
memory.
Not to get too mystical, but the thought of rocks being conscious kind of started making me think of some of like normal things, like where you go to a certain location, let's say a place from like the Civil War or something, and you go stand on these hills and you feel this energy. Maybe there is something to that where there's energy trapped in the rock or whatever it is. I don't know.
Well, yeah.
There's a scientist.
Go ahead.
I see.
There's a scientist named Rupert Sheldrake who morphic resonance is his theory, which certain quartz and different things hold a memory. Like if you go like a music studio where all these famous musicians recorded, and there's a built-in memory, like Muscle Shoals, where all these classic rock famous albums are recorded. There's something in the walls. There's something about the place that where the water meets the land and just the energy about it. So I do think what he's saying, there could be something with that, with maybe a memory being trapped in quartz or some sort of rock.
Yeah, definitely.
We have just done a podcast with Kilindi E. Have you seen this guy? Should you know him? No? Oh, check him out. This is the only guy in the world who takes magic mushrooms in dry 30 to 40 grams. Heroic dose is supposed to be 5 grams, right?
Yeah. That's
He's taking 30 to 40.
Holy
So we did the podcast with him, where the main subject was how to navigate through the psychedelic experiences, and one of the tools that he has mentioned is crystals. So he's using crystals as computers.
Yeah.
So he's recording the experiences inside. He's recording the locations. He can access the same location twice. I mean, as many times as he wants, thanks to those crystals. And usually he's using quartz and some other African. It's a black guy. Have a look. It's African, and so he talks about another African crystal or something. And I was always laughing because I was doing yoga, and I mean always, and somebody was bringing a big crystal and pointing at the guy who's doing the exercise and recording the whole mantra Vudra thing for the future. They will record it for the future. But here I am with the 40-gram mushroom guy who does something similar,
Wow.
And he calls it room temperature computer.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, I mean, there's something to that, man. Like, I've heard multiple times. So, like, I'm big into sleep paralysis, and so because it was a very traumatic experience for me. But I was in the military, so I moved a lot around, and I've noticed that when I change spots on the earth, because I'm moving, my sleep paralysis experience will also change. And I always kind of wondered, was there something to that? It was like some type of electromagnetic frequency was causing this to happen to me or something. And I was speaking to Ryan Hurd, who's runs dreamstudies.org, and he told me about a guy that's in Hawaii that he sleeps on lava tubes, and he started like documenting when he would sleep on a lava tube and when he wouldn't, and he started having sleep paralysis more whenever he's on a lava tube than anywhere else. So that made me kind of think that maybe there's something to do with these fields that are generated from different materials. Crystals have a different field, and that's scientifically proven that these things have different fields than some other rocks and stuff. So maybe somehow information is stored in those fields. I mean, humans have fields, and the earth has fields and stuff like that too. So maybe that has something to do with consciousness. I don't know. It's interesting.
Did you see
what
that?
I can memorize? Imagine the crystals with each single atom there. We are writing on the hard drives, making those dots and all that. But how many we need? Imagine those guys, and it's just different vibration of.
I think it's all vibration based too. I think we're all on some sort of frequency.
Terabytes and terabytes and terabytes upon terabytes, and they just discovered in DNA that I just was reading this. What was it? The Cosmic Serpent or something like that.
Yeah.
The book quite nice book. Yeah, quite nice book. And then at the same time, I was discovering that the scientists discovered a second language for the DNA.
Hmm.
So they were aware of one language, but on top of it, there was another, like sentence, and then the sentence is a word.
Wow.
In the sentence, you have one sentence, and then one sentence in a word, and you put a few sentences, you have the new sentence. So it's like, another language in parallel inside the DNA. So we have been missing another language. The whole book was not read completely.
That's the story of human existence, isn't it?
Well, Francis
so-
Crick, the guy that discovered it, he was on LSD experimenting it during the time that he discovered the double helix.
You see.
But yeah, what I was going to say though, what you were just saying about the crystals and how there's something about like the guys sleeping on the lava fields. They just discovered, the physicists just went through and did a study on the Great Pyramid, and you should look up these thermal charts. It shows what a lot of people have been thinking, that it concentrates energy in that exact point. And most people don't realize that if there was like one center point on the Earth, it would be where the Great Pyramid's built.
Wow.
So.
Yeah, I saw the
Yeah,
the
I read.
visuals.
Oh, go ahead.
I saw the visuals.
I read.
from
I
that.
read. No.
Go ahead, dude.
No, go ahead. Sorry.
Remember,
yeah,
Lee, I told you, if it's 4%,
no.
I don't know how we control the sound.
You
Man.
get to
If it's
10,
5
man,
or
you go
6,
crazy.
oh.
Yeah, I saw the visuals online of the things that you posted about the scans of it. It looked pretty crazy, man. And like I always thought, man, that there was something more to it than just like, a dead body inside this thing. It's like, why? It just seemed improbable these people were doing that.
But mainstream's gonna say that because they're all reductionists. They don't have an imagination beyond what they can see in front of their face.
Yeah, exactly. And they don't there was a
You just slap them.
Yeah. There was a discussion on Joe Rogan from a guy that he's not an Egyptologist, but he studies the Sphinx specifically. And this dude knew his shit. And
Robert Schoch,
maybe that guy. I'm bad
is that
with
the guy
names.
that he was talking about how the Sphinx was older and he's a
Yeah.
geologist?
Yeah.
Yeah, that guy.
He said that the Egyptologists have a dialogue that they want their dialogue to be set in stone. They don't want
Same,
anybody
yeah.
changing it up. So it would you're right, and it makes sense that these people kind of want to continue this dialogue and have it a nice story that they buttoned up, that
There's books and
yeah.
lectures. They have their own stuff to protect.
It's like a
it's not just
religion, man.
about. Well, yeah, it's a lot of them. I'm sure there are people that are for the truth, that only want to get the truth out there. But like anything else, these people are human beings and they're flawed. And if they can make money, and it's easier to just say, "Oh, let's go," don't question that. We've already figured that out, but we really haven't, because we don't even know. The best theory is a recent theory by this guy Jean-Pierre Boutin, who thinks that there was an internal ramp. That's how they built it. And the Grand Gallery was a ramp where they would load the blocks up there. It was this whole there's a cool thing on the History Channel about it. But
Not a fucking bad idea there.
yeah, but there's not a lot of real theories. That the one mainstream one that a lot of Egyptologists think is there was one massive ramp. But the problem with that is there would have had to have been more stone used for the ramp than the actual building of the pyramid itself. So it's like,
Yeah.
where did all that stone go?
Yeah.
And it would have been too narrow for all the amount of people needed to pull one of those blocks. It would have been, too narrow for that.
Yeah, I mean, I don't even want to have a theory of how they built it, but I do have like this crappy theory on what it's used for that isn't backed by any science that I know about. So it was just like I got stoned and then I was thinking about pyramids. So I thought there was this possibility, and I know that the Egyptians were into lucid dreaming, like that's known, so that's kind of proven, or at least supported. So my idea was that this pharaoh, whatever, all his life was like brought up into like experiencing the altered states, right? Natural altered states, or even chemically induced altered states, because they have like very high DMT plants in that area too. So it's unlikely that they didn't use it. More likely
There's a
that
lot
they
of
did.
acacia in that area.
Yeah, and Syrian root.
And the
too.
thing is, with all the psychedelic experiences, I don't know, you guys, if some of you have done, you can see those structures, right?
Oh yeah, definitely.
Those
I
light
meditate. I saw
structures,
pyramids when I meditate.
Fantastic.
Yeah. So like my idea was that they
or
would go, this pharaoh would go in there and he would do something, with sound, and then harmonically, go out into a
and
specific place, like
Well,
then
imagine
he
being
then,
put.
then he comes back. Okay, fucker. So everyone puts
yeah,
up to work for the next 10 years.
yeah,
He
exactly.
gonna build that fucker that I've seen yesterday on a trip, man.
Yeah. But I
That's
mean, it
weird
would
you
be
say
some
that.
tool,
I've thought about that too. There's this book called the Emerald Tablets of Thoth. Thoth was obviously an Egyptian god, but the book is about these hidden hermetic teachings and different things. But it talks about how in the Great Pyramid, how there's the sarcophagus that's built out of stone that's in the middle.
Yeah.
That maybe somebody would go in there and it's like a deprivation thing, like somebody gets sealed in there for a little bit, maybe takes hallucinogens, maybe I've heard people that go into
Maybe
the
they
Great
don't need
Pyramid.
them.
Yeah, exactly. I've heard
Put
people that go into the Great Pyramid.
Put an eye mask for Christ's sake.
well, it changes, like being inside the vibration of it alone just causes your consciousness to be
Oh, yeah,
altered.
they didn't have vibrators at that time.
Yeah, I think
Might have had infant vibrators, man. You don't know.
Guys, I make some jokes and I gotta go, guys.
Oh, okay.
wooden
That's cool, Yuri.
dildos.
Thanks for coming, Yuri. Appreciate it, dude.
Yeah,
Hopefully
thank
we
you.
get
I
next time
gotta
longer.
go. I gotta go. It's I
Nice to
have
meet
only
you.
half an hour, guys.
Yeah, no
Have a good
problem.
one.
Take
Yeah,
care, dude.
come join on the Lucidity 4. I'm teaching lucid dreaming, out of body, all that. And in August, I'm gonna do a workshop, and for the first time, I'm gonna take this idea, of a few guys to come online. So I'm gonna do the physical workshop, but I'm
Nice.
gonna hook up a few computers to it and
Nice.
have a few guys around the world to join as well.
Cool, dude. That'd be fun.
Yeah, we'll check out.
And,
I'll check your stuff out. I'll have Lee send us your stuff so I can take a look at it.
And I want to know about your stuff. So you've got my name. You have Lee. He will tell you how to find me. And join me, guys. Maurice and Mike. I want to know what you guys are doing. We didn't have time to talk about it.
For sure.
Yeah, share your stuff. I'll be interested to connect with you guys.
All right, man.
Okay, you have a nice conversation.
Yeah,
See
take
you
care,
guys
Yuri.
again.
Nice
See ya,
meeting
dude.
you.
See you. Bye bye.
Bye, man.
Thanks, Lee.
Yeah,
Thanks.
no problem, dude.
Bye.
Yeah, I mean, with the pyramid, so like, okay, this is something I was thinking about with my buddies about, I mean, we're getting into altered states of consciousness and try to like, they use the pyramids to like transport yourself someplace. So the idea was, this idea that I've been having is like, okay, you have all these people taking, substances or whatever, right? Or having out of body experiences and things like that. And they always go to different places. So like, for me, like I generally don't go to the same place ever twice. So if I'm having an out of body experience, I'll go someplace, and it's generally someplace I've never been before. Sometimes you go back to the same place, but it's unlikely that would happen. So, I was talking to my friend Richard, who has been on, like I've talked to him before on this show thing, and he talked about where the Book of the Dead, like the Egyptian Book of the Dead and the Buddhist Book of the Dead, it's written in such a way that people go through these series of events, and like you go up to the door and you say something, or and it's all of the specific way. So these people, when they die, pretty much they all go to the same place as long as they memorize these certain tasks that they have to do.
That's
Yeah,
what
you
we
were
were talking
saying
about
about this
last
last
time.
time.
Yeah,
Oh,
I was
okay.
just where we were talking about how, like maybe when
I
we
like
die,
that theory.
we all go to wherever we think we go. But if
Yeah.
people know where the other people are going, they can all meet up on the other
Exactly.
side.
And
Um,
probably your talk is what generated this idea about the pyramids. And the idea is like maybe the pyramids was a way to like go to some specific place every single time. So you could actually like somehow they figured out that this harmonic frequency or whatever, when you do something inside of it, will transport your consciousness to another place. And then it goes there consistently. And then you can bring back information or something happens during that period. I don't know. But they did it for some reason, and they took a long time,
I mean,
Mind-blowing.
Tesla's all about vibration, and like books like the Urantia Papers, which I even if you don't believe anything in it, I definitely recommend
Yeah,
reading
what's
it.
that about?
It's a Christian.
Fucking
It's like
crazy. No,
it's like an updated
Pretty
revelation of Christian, like Jesus's whole life's in there, so you get to learn about his like, middle years and everything. Look, I grew up Roman Catholic. I don't follow any of that shit anymore, just because I
Yeah.
think there's a bunch of like political stuff, like stupid stuff that doesn't even make sense, like eating meat and not eating meat on Friday and
Yeah.
shit like during Lent, stupid shit like that. So I grew up Catholic, and I still believe in a creator God, and I know Jesus was a real person based on everything that I've learned. And I've looked deep into it, and like people like to fight the fact that Jesus was a real person, but the way that you can, explain that he was, and then what I try and tell people is, even skeptical people, is that whether you believe he was this magical being that shot off, he was a real person. Like there's a Pontius Pilate stone. So if Pontius Pilate was real, and you look at the text, so Pontius Pilate interacted with Jesus. All these other there was a lot of Jewish people that were against Jesus, that hated him. So when you look at ancient texts to verify if somebody's real or not, you look at the opposition. So if there's an opposition to this person, whether it be they don't like his work or his teachings or whatever, that must mean he's a real being, because why would somebody go through the
Well,
hassle?
who says he's not a lie?
There's
It's a
dude,
fact that he
go
lived, isn't
online,
it?
go
Dude,
online, bro.
I got a
Go
book
on
that
Reddit, go on Reddit, go on
Yeah.
Facebook.
Well,
I got a
what side are
book.
you on? Because I just read a huge scientific study that just said we just found Jesus's bones and
Did
all
they
this
find it
stuff.
though?
They said that they found it at a cave, and
Man, I'm
I
trying to
saw
finish this
that-
book. I have a book that
There's a
talks about
tomb.
Jesus being a mushroom, man.
Oh yeah, the sacred.
Yeah,
Jesus
sacred
and the
mushroom,
Sacred
I think it's
Mushroom,
called.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I
that's what
mean,
Mario Brothers was based on.
yeah.
Was that by Allegro?
No, it was Allegro's work. So this guy, he read his work, and then he pretty much went to all these like famous churches and took a bunch of pictures of mushrooms, like literally psychedelic mushrooms in cathedrals, that are ordained by the church in order to be there. They just weren't accidentally drawn in there, But I mean, like, it, I read his book and I was interested in it, and I was at the time where I was like pretty anti-religion, which everyone kind of gets to that point when they change their belief systems, but I don't think there's much justification saying that Jesus wasn't a real person. It just doesn't. They could have been using mushrooms, that's a possibility.
Oh, that's the thing. I definitely. Well, they've been fasting in the desert, and where their location is, they could very easily have been eating mushrooms. And it says that the interesting thing about the Urantia papers, instead of Jesus praying, he would go to meditate to speak with his Father. So maybe he would go eat mushrooms and meditate. Maybe he would just meditate on his own. And look, I think meditation is obviously, is like a very powerful tool. So when you start talking about things like that, Jesus starts to become like a realistic person, as opposed to this illusion of supernatural that they've painted in the Bible. And most people that are hardcore Catholic or Christian don't even realize, like the Bible wasn't even starting to be written till by Paul till like 70 AD. That's 70 years after Jesus's death. By then, how many people actually knew?
It's all skewed.
Besides all of his disciples and stuff, and then on top of that, I think the New Testament alone is like a collection of like 30 or 40 different stories from different people.
Yeah.
In the Old Testament, like God is this, we talk about, I'm more, if I was to think of myself, it'd be more like Gnostic, meaning that, I don't, if you look at the Old Testament, that God is a hateful, vengeful God, so like, in the Old Testament, it's like, oh, I am the only God, for I am the only God. If you, should not take another God, or like that kind of stuff. Like if you really created everybody, you wouldn't need to say those things. You wouldn't need to project those things. You wouldn't need to make people fearful,
Seems a little bit too human to me in the Old Testament. He's very human like.
So
Maybe he was just
like
pissed off back then, man, and he got a little more chill.
that could be it. But I think the Gnostic
laid.
is interesting. Yeah. The Gnostic thing is interesting because it's saying that we were all part of God, and then it's kind of complicated. You can watch our episode on it, and I explain it pretty well. But the thing is that they think this creature, Yaldabaoth, who, so there was this part of God was this thing before. Okay, it's just this, think of this as everything. Okay, and a piece of him emanated by a female aspect without her male aspect, which was the Christ consciousness. Okay. So when Sophia emanated without her male counterpart, she created this beast, this being called Yaldabaoth, which what we think is God, or what the Old Testament calls God. This is the Gnostic, obviously, philosophy, but that he created a inferior copy of the spiritual realm. So we're all sparks or pieces of God trapped inside these bodies in a world that has limits and rules, because this being created this world without the knowledge of the spiritual realm. Like, so it's like an ignorant God creating without the knowledge of the true, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
You're really on board with this one, huh?
Yeah, you're
I'm not
into
on board.
this.
I think
you're into this.
I
Oh,
could
he's
even,
been. Oh, he is with that.
I could apply this though to simulation too, because think about it. If we're in a simulation, there could be somebody that doesn't know, what somebody else knows, how that person, like maybe a computer or something we don't know about created us. Well, maybe something
Well,
created
yeah, it's
him.
just like us
If that
creating,
person didn't know that it was created by that thing, maybe it doesn't know about this other way of self,
Yeah, I mean, that's interesting. I mean, for me, like religion's like extreme in consciousness. It's important. So, it implies to the consciousness topic. So, but for me, like religion and what I'm starting to understand through, not Joseph Campbell. I always try to do that. Or yeah, Joseph Campbell. Yeah, hero's journey stuff. That's what I was trying to talk to you guys about last time, and I totally messed his name up. So I've been like trying to practice his name to make sure I get the right one.
well, it's better because we did a little more research on him. So
Oh, good, man. Yeah, that dude is awesome, man. He's got so much information about this hero's journey concept, this theme that plays
He's
out
talking.
throughout
We
history.
did Tom Campbell. He's talking about
Yeah,
Oh,
Joseph
Joseph.
Campbell.
here we
He's
go,
an
bro.
archetype.
Yeah,
He's an
this,
archetype
uh,
psychologist.
Yeah, this
going
guy.
over my head again,
Oh,
man.
It's cool. Well, the idea behind him is his. These aren't ideas of his. He's just researched mythology, but there's these consistent themes throughout history of these mythologies that have their consistent theme, and they talk about a story, and it's a general. It's the same story being played over and over again. Like Star Wars is a good example of the hero's journey,
Yeah.
like to the T.
Exactly.
Like George
Mhm.
Lucas actually talked to Joseph Campbell about the screenplay, things like that, and that's where he got a lot of his ideas from. But it works so well because it applies to the human consciousness. Like it seems to be some weird way encoded in each of us, this theme, the story that we have to be part of. Nobody knows why. Even he didn't know why. He's like, I don't know why, but you just have to have this story. Like you have to generate it for yourself, or you have to use somebody else's story. And the Bible also plays into the same theme. And then what happens to these themes is they get influenced by cultural times and stuff like that. So then, like don't eat meat, certain things like that, don't eat certain types of meat, whatever. That is a cultural thing of the time, and then stories get involved and stuff like that for lessons of the time. So like the Bible really, isn't a cultural theme that we have today. Like not theme, but it's not, there's stories in there that don't apply to us, but their overall theme does, and that's why it still resonates with people. So I mean, like in that sense, it's a good thing, and there's good
I
stories
think people
in there.
I think people shit on religion, but I don't think they understand how important it is
No,
in the
it's
sense that
absolutely
we wouldn't be here right now if it wasn't for religion.
Oh yeah.
Like we literally went from cave people to beating the fuck out of each other and getting slaughtered by saber-toothed tigers and woolly mammoths and shit, to coming together, building community, and then from community building this greater idea of maybe there's this, maybe we're created for a reason, or maybe there's a purpose and it's not just surviving, So I think people like to shit on religion, and maybe we're going to get past religion. Maybe there's some other next step. Maybe science will figure things out in terms of, the quantum world or the meta world, and we'll get to the crux of this thing. But I mean, even now, like you listen, there's a Sean Carroll one with Joe Rogan yesterday, and he's like one of the top physicists. And he talks about these things. He's like, and the scientists have to be sure. A lot of them speculate and they'll say things and whatever, but a lot of them are just theories, like,
Yeah,
Dude,
Even
it's all
science is
theories, man.
theories, yeah.
The more
Yeah,
I get into this shit, the more I get. It's like, oh, I can't believe how I just took all this shit from school. It's like this is the way. I want to bring it back to the fucking pyramid thing where I just read a whole article about these things. They generate all this energy, and oh, we thought that they might be power plants, and now all this energy, all this stuff's coming out where it's proving it. But they were built by slaves, and they were built. It's like, and then they
Yeah.
go right back to the same fucking
right.
It's like this doesn't make any
script
sense.
that's been writ for this shit for the the last
Yeah.
whatever.
Well, you know how
50 years.
the mainstream people say that they cut the blocks too, using copper saws,
Yeah.
using sand. They put a line of sand and then they use the saw on top of that. Some guy tried to recreate it. It took him like 4 hours to get like a millimeter or
Fucking-
something.
Yeah, no.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
So I don't know, man. They want to keep it to that book, though, man.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, we're starting to prove that these things were built for something else, but they're still built by slaves. They're still built at this time. So I don't know, man. The book shit is just all science. It's like, what the fuck?
yeah.
Just be
I
truthful
think-
with us.
I think
That's all
there's
I'm
too
saying.
much woo woo though. I think like right now I've a lot of this Egypt stuff. Like I know like you can talk about obelisks. Like obelisks were pounded out with stones. There's pounding marks on them. It's like some people think that those are magical, just like the pyramids. I think the pyramids are more questionable because we don't know. There's really not a lot about obelisks. There's still one half constructed in the ground, so we have a good idea of how those were constructed. So like
What's that again?
an obelisk, you know,
It's
like
a skinny thing
the
that goes up and
like how we have in our nation's capital. It's like the tall
Oh,
tower with
okay.
the point at the
Yeah,
top.
yeah.
There's one in the, and that's the other thing is like in the Vatican, they have an Egyptian obelisk that they imported from Egypt in the main square in the.
Telling you, man,
in the
they're
Vatican.
transmitting shit, Wi-Fi
Yeah.
all over the fucking
So,
world.
well, and that's a speculation too. I mean, those things, if those things are made out of quartz, if that's one piece, you know, that has quartz in it, it could. Why wouldn't it be able to
Yeah.
either collect energy or create energy? But what I was going to say is there's too much. There's people that think actual aliens came down and built these things. Okay, which is fucking ridiculous.
Is it ridiculous?
I think it is. You
I'm
know,
not saying
okay,
anything's ridiculous anymore,
Yeah,
man.
man.
Fuck.
so if I were to get crazy, which I don't believe this
I'm
at
with
all,
Maurice
but
on this one.
Dude,
I'm
a
with
far
you.
more plausible, if you're gonna get crazy like with that kind of shit, I think woolly mammoths were still alive when the pyramids were built.
That's
Seriously.
get
So
crazy.
so if you were gonna say something about aliens, well, I would first say a more logical thing would be maybe they got a couple woolly mammoths to just drag these fucking things. I don't believe that, and they've never found any bones or anything
Yeah.
like that. But I'm just saying, like, there's
I like
steps
that
to
water
get there.
theory.
There's steps to get there before that, you know. So I think I've been reading a lot of books on ancient Egypt and physics and different theories and different things on stuff just to get a better general knowledge of stuff. And what I found is there's a little truth in everything. So
Yeah.
some of the things that we find is fringe or woo woo, there's some truth to that, but
Yeah.
we don't have enough knowledge to back any of that up. So it's like you have to walk this line where it's like, I want to know these things and I'm going to push to learn them, but I don't want to get too far out of my mind where people think I'm crazy, you know, seriously,
Yeah.
because like, you know, I think we've all thought crazy shit sometimes, you know, everybody does it, but
Well, there's a thin line between flat Earth and fucking,
Yeah. Yeah.
JFK. It's like,
right.
Well,
I mean, I was just talking to somebody about this this last week, I think, where I tend to ride the line of crazy and sane. I try to, anyways. But that shit's hard, man, because it's like I've had experiences that are absolutely, mind blowing for me to
Insane.
have. Yeah, I mean, they totally jacked up everything that I believed in, and it's real stuff that I've really had. And generally, if I tell somebody about it, if they know me and they believe me, I think, because they know that I'm not like a bullshitter. But if I met a random stranger and started talking about it, they'd be like, "What the hell? This guy's insane," And it's like, no,
I
that's
believed
real
your
shit that
UFO
happened.
story. Yeah, I believed your UFO story on the episode we did with you. Do I think that there were little green men in a UFO? I don't know,
Yeah,
but I
don't
know
either.
I know that I could tell from your voice, and I'm pretty good at judging people on bullshit. I'd say I believe that you had that experience. Now, was it tangible to the real world, or is it some metaphysical thing,
Yeah.
or like we were talking about this on our last episode of our podcast with this kid Andrew, and he was talking about we were talking about the Tom Campbell simulation thing, and putting on different masks. Maybe these are all the same thing that are just putting on different masks for the scenario. So maybe you, instead of seeing like a demon or
Yeah.
a goblin or a machine elf or whatever, your mindset was towards a UFO. Not that you were looking for a UFO, but just
Right.
that would have been the most plausible explanation for what you're seeing.
Oh, yeah.
Now, what is that thing? What
I
is
mean,
that thing? We don't know. You know,
In that
but-
time of my life, I was interested in space, UFO kind of stuff, things like that. So I was looking for, and my mind could have been set to identify with that. But if I was in the middle of the Amazon, hanging out with some shamans or something like that, I would have absolutely thought it was a spirit. There's no way
Sure.
that I would know what a UFO was or anything. So, I mean, if you read a lot of shaman experiences in the Amazon and their use of ayahuasca, they talk about doctors coming and help them. But then if you really look into what these doctors are and how they describe them, they're like gray men. They're like gray aliens. And so I'm like, whoa, like they don't know what a UFO is or an alien is. They think it's spirits, and doctors, because that's all they know. So I mean, like we generate. I mean, that's what going back to myth and religion. Like
Right. the
religion
archetypes.
is an interpretation of an experience at that specific time. That's all it is. So like today, if we saw something, we would describe it in a certain way, but in 10,000 years from now, that's a shitload of long time away.
Yeah.
We would totally describe those things as something totally different, especially if like our entire civilization got wiped out and just like
Yeah.
a few of us lived, which is possibly what happened. Then we would see these things as completely different, like that.
Oh, that absolutely did happen. Lake
Yeah.
Toba, 20 or 75,000 years ago, there was a super volcano that wiped out I think 10,000 people were left on the earth. There was millions.
Well, that guy talked about the Egypt guy. He talked about some type of solar burst happening from the sun. creating
Yeah,
all these
that's,
effects. And I was like,
yep.
that shit sound real, man. Like it.
Yeah, and how he's explaining for all the what are they called? Petroglyphs and all
Yeah.
the different
Yeah.
glyphs around the world, how they look like little stick men, and
Yeah,
that
with
there's a
those
formation.
circles
Yeah,
on
there's
the
a little
side.
formation with the circles from the flare. Now, I looked into that. If you do a little bit more research into that, you'll see that I guess I could kind of see that, but then I went looking through like all the actual cave paintings that I know of, like the
Yeah.
ones in the Grand Canyon and the Anasazi ones and all the different ones of like the Ant-Men and all the the Mesoamerican ones
Ant-Man.
and stuff like that. And so when I look through there, I could kind of see that, but I think
Mhm.
that's a stretch, that part
Okay.
of it. I believe in the possible of the solar flare thing, but then people seeing that in the sky and then wanting to record that, it's more plausible that they were just trying to capture a human being or like a spirit or something, like that.
Interesting. Yeah, I didn't really look more into it. I mean, he sounds so believable. I was like,
Right.
that's that line, man, where I'm like, oh,
Well, that
okay.
dude's on Ancient Aliens. Look, Graham Hancock's on Ancient Aliens. There's a lot of people on Ancient Aliens that are actual real people too that are taken serious, credible. So you just have to know which ones. Like David Wilcox, maybe not pay attention at all to what that guy has to say.
Oh, I
You know,
went down
Jo-
his rabbit hole the other day.
Oh god.
Well, you went down a wrong hole then, fool.
I know what the fuck I was like, this is pretty weird. This
Yeah.
guy was
No,
going
that guy-
he-
That
Now
guy's
you're
out of
talking
his
about
mind.
stepping the line, dude. This guy's fucking so far past the line. He's chilling with reptile aliens in the center of the earth.
Yeah, I hear reptile stuff come up every once in a while. I'm like, okay,
Yeah,
man.
reptilian's a popular thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know about that. I mean, I definitely.
Billy Corgan was.
Go ahead, man.
I was gonna say Billy Corgan was on Howard Stern, and he was asking him about some stuff, and he was saying some shit about seeing a shapeshifter, and he was like dead serious.
Hmm.
So I don't know.
Yeah, man. I mean, what
He was asking him. He
um,
was asking him about like reptilians and shit, you know.
Mike was telling me about. I don't know if you guys want to talk about it right now or in your podcast, but Mike was telling me about your recent experiences, like with some substances or something like that.
Oh yeah.
This isn't on our thing, so I don't care. It's up to this
Okay.
kid.
It's cool.
Yeah, no, I
whatever.
mean it was pretty.
Only if
it
we
was
send
pretty-
this to his dad after
Oh.
it's done.
Sure, man.
Yeah, I smoked a joint, and
Sounds like it was a little bit more of a joint.
the carpet in my bathroom turned into a coral reef. You
Oh,
know.
wow. That's powerful.
Yeah, it was pretty cool, but
ganja.
Well, forget about the actual
I
substance.
don't think I used it to its full potential. It was more of just like I was out party. I used it for party. I'm not gonna lie.
Okay.
Which after I went through it, I'm like, fuck, that was such a waste. You
Yeah.
know, it wasn't like I was planning on doing it or anything. But after seeing how powerful it is, I mean, it was cool to do and see. You know, but you got to kind of plan it out. I wish I was outside more. And again, you got to have a kind of a itinerary. I think at least, or have your mind wanting to take your mind somewhere particular.
Yeah.
I think so. You didn't have any. You didn't have. Well, you didn't think anything weird or like think about
Oh,
anything
yeah,
you're talking
sure.
about and stuff.
Yeah, I thought that all energy. I don't know. I felt like the energy was just circling around. I just felt like a circular type of thing, and I wasn't scared or anything. It felt that it was like a calming sensation, kind of just a reassurance that all energy will circle around and kind of come back again. I don't know. When you're on it, it's way you can explain it more, but then you're talking to other
Yeah.
people, and you make no sense. But to you do, you know.
Yeah, totally.
And then now I'm trying to explain it. It's like it doesn't even really make sense.
I mean, what you
anymore.
just
I
said
don't
was
know.
kind of cool. I mean, I believe that in
Yeah.
the sense. I mean, we know the second law, which we do know is a law, the second law of thermodynamics. Energy cannot be created nor destroyed. It can only be transferred. So what you're saying makes sense, you know?
And I don't know if what you're seeing is actually shit or if you're
Right.
creating your. I don't know. That's the conundrum behind it. Is it taking walls away from you, so you're seeing more of reality, or are you putting shit on you,
Well,
and
this
that's
is
what's generating what you see?
in this book I'm reading. They one of the theories, I guess, on dreams that I didn't actually know about, and it applies to hallucinogens, obviously, is that we're actually continually hallucinating. You know, we're continually dreaming at all times. So, like right now, we're actually having those type of experiences as well, where weird abstract ideas and things like that appear, but we just don't realize it because our consciousness, or what we call consciousness, is actually blocking it. And then when we start removing or quieting that consciousness down, then the other one kind of comes forward and appears. And that's a theory, but it resonates with
That's
me.
a TED talk. You should look for that TED talk.
Hmm.
It's a good one where the guy it's called Hallucinating Our Reality, I think is the title of it.
Well, I like that thought because when you're a kid, maybe it's the reality hasn't waned on you as much, and as you grow older, then because that's what they say, well, you're not really fully developed. Maybe that's what's happening is you're fully developing into this consciousness. Because when you're a kid, everything's fucking amazing, and that's almost like that's kind of the only thing I can relate taking that to is it's just like you're almost like a kid again, in the sense that everything is just wide open for you.
Oh
and
yeah, man.
I don't know, it's magical.
I've had when I've been on substances, I've had straight up daydreams where it seemed absolutely real, where I play with an idea like I would when I was a kid, and it was just, it felt so real and alive that I was like, yeah, that's pretty amazing, man. Seems alters, when you alter your brain, you can imagine some pretty wild stuff.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
there's a cool. You guys should look up this show on History Channel. It's called In Search of. The first one's about aliens. It was kind of stupid. Wasn't really worth it. But the second one was about like superhuman stuff. So like, the one guy rolled the metal down on a car that was catching on fire to save these people's lives. Like somehow he mustered up the strength to bend the frame of the window of the door.
Holy shit.
And so they had that guy on, and then they had, do you know about Shaolin monks?
Yeah.
They're like the most intense fighters. Like they can withstand like pain like nobody on earth. So they had one of those guys on,
The
and that guy.
Unsullied.
Yeah. So that guy was nuts. That guy would meditate for like 2 minutes, and then he would break this like fucking baseball bat style stick over his head that they said it would knock anybody else like unconscious.
Oh.
And they had him hooked up to
That's
all
sweet.
the brain scanning machines and stuff, and it didn't even phase him like it would like anybody else. So like, and then they also had the one guy meditate, and they showed what the brain looked like under meditation, and there was more active parts than you would normally kind of see and stuff. So that's a cool show, and it shows. And they did the one with the guy. They did a simulation of the guy being able to pull that superhuman strength back, and they showed that like adrenaline and all the stuff pumping through your body like can help you do crazy ass shit that you normally wouldn't be able to do.
Crazy,
It's
man.
wacky. It's
Well,
like if you smoke some fucking drugs, man, you'll be able to lift cars and shit.
PCP, yeah.
PCP, man. I've heard some crazy stuff about that.
That's a crazy. If you ever watch, have you ever seen Hamilton's Pharmacopoeia?
No, you keep talking about
Oh,
that. I need
dude, you
to-
got
Yeah,
to
you
do it.
played on
It'll blow your mind, man. I've learned more about substances from that show than I have anything else ever.
I don't have cable though. Is it on Netflix or?
It's on Hulu.
Oh,
All the
okay.
I don't
episodes are on Hulu.
Yeah, I'll have to find an
It's on
alternate way.
Viceland. It's on, if you have Comcast, it's on Viceland too. But there's an episode. It says one positive story about PCP, and it's this crazy guy, this old guy. He's like an artist, and he was able to use it for like positive stuff, and it didn't affect him in the sense that like these people beating the shit out of other people and doing crazy shit, and he used it in some sort of therapeutic manner. And that same guy was also on the ketamine episode too. So
Yeah, like I've heard. I mean, like, you know, I'm pretty against like hardcore drugs, but just for myself. But I've had some friends that have definitely been on some harder stuff. One guy, he had like severe depression, and the only way that he could get off of his depression was to take meth. And like he would use it in
Jesus.
such small amounts though. And he had a therapist and everything, and he was honest with them. I don't remember what country. It's not America, but he was honest about it with the therapist, and the therapist is like, "Hey, you got to stop doing that," you know. So he stopped, and he got way worse. They were using medication, you know, prescribed medication, and he got way bad. And then the therapist finally pretty much told him to like go back to what he was doing. But it's hard to manage for him, you know, like. There's always that desire to continue to use more and more, but he does that. He doesn't go into start using it more and more, and it helps him with his depression. So I mean, so you know, it's a touchy subject because you don't want people getting addicted to this.
I mean,
nasty
Adderall is
world
only
stuff.
one molecule away.
Yeah.
So I mean, it's
Yeah.
Adderall. I mean, I know this kid can tell you some stories. I know some people that flip the fuck out on Adderall.
Oh yeah, man.
Seriously, like
Yeah.
it turns you into like a worse version
Oh,
of
yeah.
yourself.
Dude, when I was a
Yeah.
little kid, man, like all these kids were on Adderall in my class, and the teacher would just send them outside because they were just like they go insane. So she
Yeah.
sent them outside, and they just
Adderall or Ritalin.
oh, maybe it was Ritalin. Yeah, it's
The
probably
same.
Ritalin.
It does the same thing.
And they would just run all day, like for hours against this wall. Just run as hard as they could to the wall, and then jump it, and then just keep doing that. We were just like, we ignored
It's gotta
it.
be
you know?
great for your heart.
Yeah, we were like, whatever.
Yeah.
They're just getting exercise, I guess. But you know, you look at that now, and you're like, whoa, what the hell's going on?
Yeah,
It's a crazy world, you know. And hopefully, I mean,
Well, I think
that's just being
conventional.
prescribed like a motherfucker.
Well, I think conventional medicine. I think the pill craze was a big.
oh,
I
yeah.
think that's why we're seeing the legalization of medical marijuana and starting to dabble in psychedelics. 'Cause I think they realize this man-made shit is just not doing anything. I think, you know, I talk about this all the time on Twitter when a couple pages on there, but there's this thing called the Hamilton scale, and it's like 1, you're good, 50, you're fucked, you know? So a good night's, or like, let's say you take Zoloft or Lexapro or Xanax or whatever one of those you want to, you know, whatever, those can only move you 2 points on the scale. A good night's sleep can move you 6 points. Healthy diet can move you a lot. You know, meditation. There's a lot of other things. You know, like they even say they're working on psychedelics to see what effect that has. But there's been huge positive effects with people with depression, with MDMA and psilocybin. People that are dying, that have depression, that have cancer and stuff with psilocybin and stuff. So
Oh yeah.
there's a huge thing going on with that. But I think that's because of the pharmaceutical thing and the pill crazy mode where these doctors were getting paid to just push these pharmaceuticals, you know, and what did the fuck
What do you
that's
were?
just
They
what-
are.
well,
Oh,
it's same
yeah.
thing. Yeah, they still are to this day. But I'm just saying, like, it's this thing where I don't think they're doing it maliciously. I think they think that that's like the newest, greatest thing. So they're going to whatever. But in reality,
it helps some people. It really does.
it does help some people. There are some people that are just chemically imbalanced, you know, but I think that, like, for instance, I had OCD. I took everything. I tried every treatment, the CBT, tried to do everything I could. None of that shit. The second I stopped taking everything and changed the way I was living my life, better sleep, better eat, you know, plant medicines here and there. You know, I think that was the game changer for me to get me on. It's almost like you're stuck on this broken record in
Yeah.
life, you know, and it just keeps going around. And if you just keep taking these medicines, you're on this merry-go-round that's just, you might be able to deal with it. Like you might be going through your day, but you know, if life goes like, you know, these drugs just keep you streamlined, which isn't good because you'll never know what real joy, you know, or even real sorrow. And I think that both of those could be beneficial to your psyche depending on the situation.
Yeah, definitely, man. Like, I mean, I always hear these people talking about, and I've done it before, where you always want to be happy. You know, you always want to have a good day. You don't want to have a bad day, kind of thing. And that's where really, like, I think drug addiction comes from, is like people just trying to maintain this positive feeling. But like, what people don't realize is like the negative side is where you actually have the experience. You know, like I have chronic pain, and I have back pain and hip pain, and I wouldn't want to give that away for anything in the world. Like if like in all honesty, like if people were like, hey, I could take that away from you, and I would be like, no, I want to keep it, because like through that pain, I can learn about the joys of life in a different way than other people can. And I've heard that again, like with other people that have cancer and stuff like that too, is they finally learned what it's like to be alive, to be conscious and aware, you know, of their life after they had their cancer, because it identifies them with death and what that's going to be like, and they want to live. And that goes back to like my ayahuasca experience, where like recently I've been talking about the bad sides of ayahuasca, right? The bad quote unquote sides. You can have a really bad trip. So I had a really bad trip once, and I thought I was going to die.
There's people that die. They have to,
Oh yeah.
before you take it. Don't they make sure that your heart and everything's up to par? Because there's some people like it can react badly. I've seen it
Yeah.
on TV.
Yeah, I mean, there are people that die from ayahuasca, definitely with heart attacks. That's generally where it comes from. I haven't heard of any other way. And there's some other things into that, like shamans in South America and stuff. You know, they're quote unquote shamans, but they're actually mixing in like additional plants into the stuff, and as well as like tobacco, large amounts of
The
tobacco.
charlatans.
Yeah, I mean, it's still practiced that even with traditional shamanism, where you add shitloads of tobacco into the drink and have people drink that and stuff. And tobacco, I mean, tobacco is actually not really bad for you, you know, in small amounts, but when you're drinking it, you know, and making people throw it up and stuff, it's kind of, it can cause some heart attacks, you know. But
They
ayahuasca
just put a
by
ball
its-
of chaw in your mouth and tell you to
Yeah.
swallow it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it gives you visions too, you know. Tobacco can definitely
Does
give you
it?
visions. Yeah, it can make you hallucinate. But wouldn't recommend people doing that. But when I had my
Shove it up your
experience-
ass and
Oh,
have
yeah.
a real
Oh, yeah.
a real hallucinogenic experience.
yeah.
The
But-
tobacco enema.
when I had my bad trip or whatever, I felt like I was going to die, and I felt like I did die. And after that experience, I'm not saying like people need to have that experience, but after that experience, excuse me, I definitely felt more alive than I ever did in my entire life. And I felt like I wanted to live so much more than ever before. And I think that was one of the first steps for me to actually get away from depression. Because before that, I had chronic depression. And then after that, it started going away. It wasn't like a cure-all, though, that experience. But
Nothing is, man.
I think from psychedelics, a lot of people's experience where they have ego death, they want to call it, you know. I think really ego death to them is actually the sensation of dying, where they really freak themselves out to the point that they're like, okay, I enjoy life now and I want to live. And so, you know, there's something from that experience.
I think that's a lot of woo woo too. We talked about that last time too. Which
Jesus, woo woo, man.
I don't know why I started saying that. I heard it on Joe Rogan all of a sudden. It's just a good way to explain. It's a good way to explain like the fringe stuff, you know, because it
Yeah.
is. It's, you know, but I think when I hear that now, like initially I'm like, oh, that makes a lot of sense. Your ego is a bad thing, but your ego isn't always a bad thing. Think about Mozart. What if he didn't have an ego?
Dude,
Or
ego-
Da Vinci? You know, like these are
Beethoven.
your ego. If you feed it the right thing, will make you a great person. I think if you if you're feeding it bullshit and you're constantly, oh, I can do this, oh, I'm better than
Yeah.
this person, oh, blah blah blah. But if you live your life in like a very humble, I always try and learn something from everybody. You know, I used to take that approach to music when I was still playing music. Like, even if I play with somebody that's shitty or less than me, I'm still going to take something from this experience, you know? And that's the way now that I look at conversations with people, whether it be in everyday like business or, you know, these
They're
talks
not
that
less
we're
than
having.
you, Jesus.
No, yeah, no, I'm just saying, like, in terms of understanding, you know, like,
I
Yeah,
get
I
you.
know,
I
I
know what
know.
you're talking about.
for instance, like if I were to play guitar with somebody that learned 2 weeks ago, well, they are less than me. I'm not gonna. That's an indisputable fact. You know,
Yeah.
you can't say whatever.
They're
But
still a person, Michael.
well, that's what I'm saying. I'm gonna learn something from that person. You know, and to be honest with you, now that when we have these talks, you know, I think everybody learns from what I've gathered when we have these discussions.
Yeah.
You know, that's why I think these are important, because we're all sharing and exchanging ideas that would not happen otherwise. I can't talk about this shit with people at like work or something. They'll be like, what the fuck are you talking about?
Yeah.
You know, like
Yeah, I tried to talk about it on that hiking trip, and these guys are like, "What the fuck?" I thought it's stoned ape theory.
Yeah.
Nick's like,
They weren't
what up,
having that
dude?
shit.
I gotta change my
You're like,
fantasy
what do
hockey
you-
league, dude.
You just smoke
No,
weed all
no,
the
it's not-
time? Is that it? You're like, dude, what? Yeah, I mean, generally people aren't really conscious of themselves, you know, and they're not conscious of like other things happening around them. So, you know, the people that are a little bit more aware or allowing themselves to at least explore these ideas, like woo woo, I get it. Like that's, I'm going to use that term too now. For
Start
me,
using
like
it. Just
woo
make it
woo
your own.
is like it's just an experience, you know, and there's nothing wrong with
The lack
somebody
of
having-
understanding, though. That's all it is. It's you're
Well-
you like you're right. You're having an experience, but it's the lack of knowledge of what's happening. You know.
Maybe, but I mean, like, okay, say somebody saw and they're like, yeah, I was praying and I saw an angel, you know. I would say that, okay, that's woo woo, you know, that goes in my category. But
Right.
at the same time, I'm like, well, why did that person have this experience? You know, like maybe they saw that, but maybe that's not really what was happening, you know, like, I mean, if they saw it, then that is what happened to them, you know, it's not, I can't credit that. That's the experience that they had. But what I can say is like, well, what are the underlying reasons of why they had that experience? Maybe they were chanting a long period of times before that, or they were in a meditative state and they're, you know, they hallucinated. I mean, all those things like are more scientific, you know, explanations of why they experienced that, but the experience is, you know, unjustified. It's like if they saw a flash of light, you know, I wouldn't say, oh, that's woo woo, you know, but I should, because it's an experience just like an angel. You know, there's no real difference besides that person's brain just generated the angels in versus like a flash of light, you know. So it's just really, you know, it's really hard to determine like what experience people have that's like discredited, you know, where you're like, I don't know about that, you know. But
Well, I think it's about objectivity. Like,
Yeah.
was that experience? It can be real, but was it objective? I mean, I think you hear Dennis and Terrence McKenna talk about that a lot in their stuff. Is like, if I saw a UFO or had an abduction experience, whether it was sleep paralysis or hallucinogenic or whatever, if it happened to me, it happened. Now, does it have some bearing on reality? I don't know. That's a
Yeah.
good question. That's something we don't know, but it's real because it happened. You know.
yeah. And then you go into what is real too, you know. You dive into
Yeah,
that one.
and it's
man.
it's also do personal experiences have an effect on reality
Oh, yeah.
or others, you know?
Well, that was like
I think-
Campbell's like newest research project he wanted to have, I guess, where he was talking about the split test experience and stuff like that, and determining if consciousness has effect on it. And for me, like in all honesty, like for me, I looked into that, and I'm not a. I mean, I took physics classes and stuff, you know, but I have friends that are like nuclear engineers and stuff, and they've kind of looked into it, and they're kind of like, I don't know about that stuff, you know, and so you know, it's to each their own, you know. They might put a woo woo label on his studies, saying like, oh well, you know, there's holes in every study. I just recently wrote about this on remote viewing, and I'm not like a huge fan of remote viewing, and there's no real like there's no real scientific evidence saying that remote viewing like works, right? There's holes in every
That's
one of their.
that guy that we were doing that simulation to. Tom Campbell guy was one of the main guys on that project with this guy Bob Monroe.
Yeah.
And this Tom Campbell guy said that remote viewing is all it is just you kind of like astral projection, like
Yeah.
what you say when you have a lucid dream or whatever. That's what that is. Now, I've had experiences where I feel like I'm seeing some sort of modern day picture or modern day short clip of something, like I had one where these Indian kids were running through this like ghetto, but it looked modern day. Was I seeing something reality or was my mind manifesting that? I don't know. But I'm not saying I believe in remote viewing in the sense that you can use it to like turn off the codes on the
Yeah.
wall for the military or whatever, stuff like that. But I do think since we don't know, I do think it's possible that maybe there is this collective unconscious
Mhm.
that once one person sees it, it's built into the memory, kind of like the Akashic record. And then that way you can kind of tap into it because it's this whole data stream that you can kind of pluck things out if you know what you're looking for.
Yeah, man, you bringing up so much stuff that I want to talk about. I don't know how much time you guys got, but
I
Yeah, I could
gotta
talk.
probably get going here,
okay,
but if you guys
yeah.
want to keep going, that's cool.
Nah, the we can end it here soon, but yeah, I mean, I've had out of body experiences where I go to Australia, right? And like 100% feels absolutely real. Like as real as me going anywhere in during my day. Like 100%. And
Right.
so I go visit my buddy, I'm like I'm going to go visit my friend who's on Australia. I've never been there, never saw his place or anything like that. So I go there, I'm in his apartment, and in my experience he has a dog, right? And he comes up to me and he's like talking to me. He doesn't notice me at first because he's like in his house doing his normal stuff, and then eventually he like starts becoming aware that I'm there, right? And he's like he sees something, and he's like, what? He walks over and he's like, what the hell is this, And I'm like, hey man, it's your friend Lee. And he's like, who? Like he can hear something, but I'm not like making it through. And
Mm-hmm.
he's like, who? And I'm like, it's your friend Lee. And he's like, Lee, what? And he's like so confused. He's like, I gotta go to work. So he like walks out, and I walk after him, and I go down these stairways into like in an open area. Anyways, and he kind of takes off. So right off the bat, he doesn't own a dog. Another thing I noticed is like on his couch that he had there, he had like a VR set. And I know like he has VR and we sometimes play VR together. And that VR set that I saw on his couch doesn't exist yet. It's just, there's nothing on the market for that. And
Sure.
and then I went and visited him and things were completely different. But I mean, like, in my experience, that was so real that, like, I would have absolutely believed that if I have never went and visited him and I didn't know anything about him, it was absolutely that way. But then, like, the other side of the coin is, like, maybe um, there's an alternate reality where that stuff did make sense and that
Well,
was
I mean,
true.
that's string theory or the multiverse theory that there's a divergence of every little detail of every world out there. So like there's another version of you right now talking about the same exact thing. Maybe you have blonde hair, or maybe you live in California, like stuff like that. So that's the problem with
Sounds pretty
that though
cool.
with physics. Yeah, well, I mean,
This
like that
California is.
they do they talk. I think Rick and Morty. There's a lot of multiverse stuff in
Yeah.
that cartoon, but
Mhm.
when you talk about like physics, with these academics and stuff, the thing that I've learned is that okay, so we have three dimensions, length, width, height. If you want to be generous, you can call time the fourth dimension. So let's say we have four dimensions. For string theory to be real, there's 7 missing dimensions. There's 11 supposed dimensions based on mathematical probability, and then M theory needs 14, and then superstring theory needs like 26, something like that. So we're not even close to cracking that if that is the case. But that's the best case scenario for you know. People that are into theoretical physics and stuff like that. That's the thing, but it's almost on its way out. Like that's
Yeah.
kind of being. People are looking for alternative explanations right now.
Well, another thing is like, um, and that's where the Egyptian pyramid idea came into mind. It's like, okay, maybe somehow that type of situation, that pyramid or whatever, that frequency allows you to go to a specific, say, this is far out there, but this is woo woo area, right? But you go to that specific dimension or that specific reality, and then you can, maybe it's like our reality. They figured out how to set that frequency that you can do this stuff and then actually go to where it actually makes a difference. Who knows how they would have decided that, or even if that is anywhere close to what they were doing. But in my mind,
I
it
think
kind
it
of
makes
makes
sense. I mean, if you look at the energy, and anybody that talks about being around the Great Pyramids talks about there's like an electricity in the air. There's like a staticness to that area.
Yeah.
The weird thing is too, and this is kind of woo woo too, but the speed of light, like if you draw out what the actual number of the speed of light is the exact coordinates of
yeah.
the Great Pyramids.
Dude, I'm gonna send you a video that will make you guys go on a rabbit hole for like 3 hours. It's a 3-hour video. I watched the entire thing. I was like, holy shit. It's this guy, and he's talking about the pyramids, Egypt, and the Masons, and like all the mathematical coordinations in between all. And the guy knows a ton. I mean, there's some stuff in there I was like, I don't know about that, but for the most part, I was like, wow.
Well, the Masonic rituals are based off of this guy Hiram Abiff, who was murdered. So, and he's the one that he was the architect for King Solomon's temple. So when they go through the rituals, when they fake kill, you go through these deaths. Like I think you die 3 times in the rituals.
Yeah.
This guy was jumped and stabbed a bunch of times. I know people that have. I don't know anything really. I mean, I know from looking into it, but I've been invited to their meetings and stuff from some guy I used to work with, but I never went.
I have some stuff to talk about in that area, but we'll leave it for another day. So,